Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the meeting of Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Kieckeffer.
Here.
Senator Sievers-Gansert. Chair Neal.
Here. So mark Senator Sievers-Gansert present as she arrives.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. So Senator Sievers-Gansert is present. Okay. So before we begin, I would like to just quickly explain how virtual committees are working. I'm sure you're very familiar. We're almost 60 days into the session. There are various ways that members of the public can participate and engage throughout the process. If you go to Nellis, you can register by clicking the participate button. You will get a email that gives you a call-in number, and you designate that you want to call in support, opposition, or neutral. You can also submit written testimony to the committee via an email address or fax number, which is listed on the Senate Revenue Agenda. You can share your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on Nellis, and you can also just view the committee through Nellis or on the legislator's YouTube channel. So today, everyone, we have a work session and two bills. So I am going to start with the work session first on SB 74, and then I will move into the bills that we have, SB 10 and SB 284. So, Mr. Reel, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Joe Reel, Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau. The bill on the work session today is Senate Bill 74. This bill revises provisions relating to the population total used in determining the distribution of certain taxes. This committee on behalf of the Department of Taxation, and it was heard on March 2nd. Senate Bill 74 eliminates the requirement for the Department of Taxation to use the population totals issued by the Census Bureau for the purposes of determining certain taxes and making certain determinations based on population in the case of a conflict between the population totals certified by the governor and the population totals issued by the Census Bureau. Specifically, Senate Bill 74 eliminates the requirement to use the population totals issued by the Census Bureau in the case of a conflict with the population totals certified by the governor from the provisions of NRS 360.690, which governs the local government distribution account, also known as the consolidated tax distribution, and from NRS 377.057, which governs the distribution of the 1.75% supplemental city-county relief tax. Bill amends NRS 377.055 to clarify that the population totals certified by the governor are to be used to determine the distribution of the proceeds from the 0.5% basic city-county relief tax. And it also eliminates obsolete references to the terms enterprise district, local government, and special district, as those terms are no longer used in Chapter 377. The work session document summarizes the individuals that testified on the measure, and there are no amendments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. And I do want to make mention for the work session document, there were local governments that had a very vested interest in SB 74, and I will call Department of Taxation director to make some comments, because there's a reason why we did not accept the amendments. Is she on? Director Young?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Neal. Melanie Young, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation. For the record, I want to thank you for your comments and the consideration of some testimony provided here today. The department has been working with the City of North Las Vegas and has heard their concerns in opposition to SB 74, and we have agreed to work with them. But before I go into the details about what the department will be doing to work with local governments, I would like to share with you here today that the state demographer, Jeff Hardcastle, will be retiring in June. Mr. Hardcastle, Jeff, has been the state demographer since January 2000, working for both the Nevada System of Higher Education and finishing out his distinguished career at the Department of Taxation. He's had significant influence on the federal funds that have come into Nevada as a result of his hard work. And I will share with you in his own words, it's all about a good address list. And Jeff worked to ensure that the list for Nevada through 2 census programs, Census Count Review and the local update of census addresses, LUCA, he directed an additional 22,647 addresses in the 2010 and the 2020 count program and the 2020 LUCA. And with the 2020 LUCA program, he coordinated the correction of 42,897 addresses, correcting more than 15,000 himself. The economic impact would equal $312 million in federal funds flowing into Nevada. To put count review into perspective, in 2010, Nevada was the 3rd highest number of addresses added through that program, just behind Texas and Florida. Jeff has worked on many efforts throughout his career, to include a 2005 study when it came to closing a barrack out at the Hawthorne Army Depot in Mineral County, where through his work showed that the depot would have an economic impact to Mineral County and help to keep it open. 2012, he worked on the Medicaid expansion impact, and additionally participating in preparing the Nevada's Elder Count publications published by the Sanford Center on Aging at UNR. So ensuring Nevada and similar states' federal data needs are represented and understood, Jeff has been a member of the Federal, State, Cooperative, and Population Estimates Steering Committee for 15 years and chaired the committee itself for 13 years. He's been a member and a panel of addressing priority technical issues for the next decade of the American Community Survey, Committee on National Statistics, and the National Academy of Sciences. He's been a participant and presenter at workshops on rationalizing rural area classifications, the Committee on National Statistics, and the National Academies of Science. He's been a presenter at the 2020 Census Data Products, Data Needs and Privacy Considerations, and a Committee on National Statistics and National Academies of Science. So prior to that, for the last 20 years that Jeff has worked as the demographer, he worked for Clark County as a planner for Clark County Comprehensive Planning from November 1990 to January of 2000. And what I'd like to share, as a result of Jeff's work in Nevada, he's been a leader in work performed at the state and the federal level. And I would like to personally thank Jeff for all of his hard work and dedication to the state. With that being said, we are interviewing for a new demographer this Friday who will be able to work with Jeff until his retirement. We are developing a plan for the new demographer in their first 6 months on the job, and this includes local government outreach, information sharing sessions on the 2020 census results, and then we have redistricting in September. It's important that the new demographer is able to come in and formulate and foster population estimates in a fair, consistent, and manner that provides integrity. With the new demographer in place, the department will be finalizing its data governance structure. In October of 2020, the department published our strategic plan, and our goal number 3 is to support the department, executives, state, local, and national decision makers by providing timely, relevant, accurate data and analysis. Where our goal here is to allow the department to provide that timely, relevant, and accurate data and analysis that is utilized by the department, state, and local decision makers with valuable information in guiding revenue discussions. And so we will continue to work with those local governments in regards to many of the reports that the department provides, including population. So that concludes what I was going to share, and I will be available for questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Young. I appreciate you putting the credentials on the record. and continuing to work with the City of Las Vegas, Henderson, and North Las Vegas as the new demographer comes on board. Thank you. Any questions on SB 74, the work session document?
Madam Chair.
Yes. Severs Ganser? Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Neal. And so, in my notes, I had that the census data does not have town level numbers, and that's why we've been using the demographer, which is eventually certified for the governor. And I guess I just wanted to confirm that it doesn't have the detail that's required for the uses that we have.
Thank you for the question. That is correct, but it's city. Let me back that statement up. So it was the census didn't have city and town numbers. Director Young?
Thank you, Senator Neal and Senator Gansert, for the question. Melanie Young, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation. And the federal census does have county and cities, but not towns and unincorporated towns, which that's the work that Jeff does for the state of Nevada. And his population estimates provide that information.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? If not, I will accept a motion for due pass since there are no amendments.
So moved.
Was that Senator Dennis?
Yes.
Second.
I have a second from Senator Ratty. Secretary, can you call the roll?
Senator Dennis,
Yes.
Senator Ratty,
Yes.
Senator Kiekefer,
Yes.
Senator Severs Gansert,
Yes.
Chair Neal.
Yes. So SB 74 passes unanimously. I will assign the floor statement to, I'll just do the floor statement. So, all right, so the floor statement is assigned to me. And so we're going to take the bills out of order. We're going to actually take Senator Ratty first. We're going to open up for SB 284 on transferable tax credits for housing. Senator Ratty.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Julia Ratty. I represent Senate District 13, which is the middle of Reno-Sparks, of course, the best district in the state of Nevada. I'm here today to talk to you about low-income housing tax credits again. Can everybody say, yay? I'm super excited for you to talk to me about low-income housing tax credits again. Great. Well, we did not put together lengthy PowerPoints or tables and charts and details like we did last session because we're hoping that there's a pretty good memory in this particular committee about this conversation. But just as a primer, I want to remind everybody that low-income housing tax credits at the federal level are responsible for about 90% of the subsidized affordable units that we have in the state of Nevada. And that federal tool is absolutely essential and critical to making sure that we continue to produce and rehabilitate our existing affordable housing. Last session, we sought to solve a problem. And that problem is that every affordable housing project, and these are projects that are done by a very niche, small group of developers who have to layer a series of financing tools, like a lasagna, you may remember from last session's presentation, all of these layers in, and all of these layers, most of them have federal dollars in them, and they are capped. And so if you layer all of those together, and you end up with, say, if perhaps you needed $1 to buy something at the dollar store, you may remember this example from last session. If you can only layer 97 cents of funding together, and you can't get that last 3 cents, then the project doesn't get built. And so the low-income housing tax credit program at the state level was established last session with the specific goal of getting that last 3 cents, if you will. And the reason that the program has the potential to be so powerful is with that last 3 cents, then you get the whole project. Without that last 3 cents, you don't get a project at all. And so it has the ability, with a relatively small amount of money from the state, to be able to increase the production of subsidized affordable units in our state pretty significantly. So you all thankfully approved the program. $40 million in tax credits were allocated to the program, and the Housing Division did its work to get ready to award the tax credits, and then the pandemic hit. And given that there was such uncertainty about, and that was about 2 months after the program was authorized to start, given that there was such uncertainty in the marketplace at that time, the Housing Division did the responsible thing and they paused the program. Because I think at that time, all development, financing, could you get construction workers on a site, all of those things were really in play. Once that there was some clarity achieved, the Housing Division reopened the low-income housing tax credit program, and we had our first project award. That was September of 2020. The first $3 million in tax credits were reserved. So you are all very familiar with how transferable tax credits work. You have to have, of course, the person who is approved to do the project. They get, we'll just call it a piece of paper, that they now have these tax credits, and then they have to find a taxpayer in the state of Nevada against one of the authorized sources of taxes who is willing to purchase that tax credit. In exchange for that purchaser then gets to use that piece of paper to pay their taxes in the state of Nevada under these certain categories. Honestly, we envisioned that most of these tax credits would be purchased by large gaming companies. And the logic behind that is that large gaming companies have to pay the most taxes in Nevada. And so they have enough of a tax burden for a $3 million tax credit to make sense. There are some other taxpayers that get close to that, but there aren't very many of them. So what happened is you have a pandemic that has shut down a lot of activity in the tourism economy, and not a lot of large gaming companies who had the capacity or interest in talking about purchasing tax credits in the middle of the throes of the pandemic. Totally understandable. A lot going on right now for our resort community. And so the market for those first round of tax credits got hit by a very unique circumstance, which was a pandemic economy. But the developers were creative and they persisted and they started talking to banks, because banks also pay some of these tax credits or taxes in the state of Nevada and could possibly have the ability to get there. It also turns out that banks have a vested interest in affordable housing. They tend to work in this realm a lot for reasons of their CRA programs and many others. And so they started working through that process. In the process of trying to get to our first project with affordable tax credits, what I would say is there were many lessons learned. So there was the need for some technical improvements, things like understanding a good definition of a closing, the timing of when the tax credits should be awarded based on how the other financing works in a project, knowing that if you were going to work with a purchaser like a bank, that they may need to be able to transfer some of those tax credits to a subsidiary. So same company, but just a different unit within that company. Lots of learnings. And so basically what this bill is, SB 284, seeks to, based on the experience of having issued our first tax credits and learning about that process, both from the developer side, the housing division side, and the companies that might purchase these tax credits in the future side, that there were some tweaks that need to be made. So most of what this bill does is give you those technical tweaks so that it can be successful moving forward in the future. The last thing that it does is it removes the sunset. So when I conceived this last session, the idea was let's do a 4-year pilot project, $40 million in tax credits were awarded, and then at the end of that 4 years, we would say, is this working? What I've since realized, and this is just probably more my learning curve, is that we've done all this work to build it in the legislative process. We hope that you will work with us this session to improve what's in NRS so that this works. And that if we don't remove the sunset on the day of the sunset, all of that just gets wiped off the books. And anybody who would want to do affordable housing tax credits in the future would have to start from scratch and wouldn't have the benefit of the learnings that we've had from getting it into the NRS last session and the tweaks that we need to make this session. So we are not asking for an additional allocation of tax credits. We think that the 40 million allocation will take us through the pilot period. But we are asking to remove the sunset so that the tax credits do stay on the books, so that if so the tax credit law stays in the NRS, so that if a future legislature thought that this program was successful and wanted to allocate more tax credits, the statutory mechanism would be there to do so. So that's basically what this bill does. I am thrilled to have subject matter experts with me who can get into the nuanced details of how these developments actually work. So I have Stephen Acroft, who is the division administrator for the housing division, which lives within business and industry. We have Michael Holliday, who's also from the housing division and really gets his hands dirty on these projects. And we have David Paul, who is with Nevada Hand, and they are one of the largest developers of subsidized affordable housing in the state of Nevada. And so they're going to take you through any technical elements of it and be here to answer any questions should you have them. Chair, would you like us to walk through the bill? It's pretty simple.
I think there's some sections for sure, but what I'll do is just let committee ask questions.
That sounds great.
All right. Any questions from members?
Madam Chair.
Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you talk a little bit about awarding the tax credits before the project is completed and then the clawback provision and why that's necessary?
Yep. So thank you, Senator Kekeffer, for the question. Before I go there, I did mean to also point you to there's a modest amendment on Nellis from the Nevada Housing Coalition. And we do have, it's a couple of words, and we are in agreement with that amendment. So just in case anybody references that amendment while we're answering questions, wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Clawback provision, Mr. Acroft, you want to take that?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Ratty. Steve Acroft, Nevada Housing Division Administrator for the record. Changing that closing narrative, if you will, basically works through the time value of money. And to maximize the value of the credits, reducing the difference from when the tax credit is issued to the time of use, we think will allow for an increased value to the developer. And this will then increase, as Senator Ratty indicated, that layered approach, give it a little deeper stack. That's changed in Section 1. In Section 1, subsection 7, the repayment provisions exist, and it allows us to review when those tax credits are issued at the beginning instead of when the certificate of occupancy occurs. So at financial closing, not certificate of occupancy, we can then determine whether the issuance of the tax credits exceeded the need for those credits at that time. Hopefully that answers your question, Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Mr. Acroft. So I know what Senator Gansert has indicated that really there are not a whole lot of people who do this work, but they tend to be pretty stable, right? I mean, there aren't a lot of folks that are going out of business in the midst of a project, and we're not going to be able to claw back our tax credits from them.
Yes, Senator or Chair Neal, through you to Senator Kekeffer. That's absolutely right. The clawback provisions that we're accustomed to seeing in some of our other tax credit programs, and I don't want to call our other tax credit programs speculative, but they do perhaps come with less certainty By the time an affordable housing project has reached the point where it would be being awarded a tax credit, the likelihood of that project going forward is very high. And so the clawback provisions that we are comfortable with and others aren't necessary here. And what is indeed happening is by having it at the end of the project, it is significantly reducing the value of the credits and creating a lot of uncertainty for developers who, because they wouldn't be able to sell that credit until the end of the project at occupancy as opposed to the front end of the project, they won't know the value to be able to move forward with their pro forma. So David Paul, who is an actual developer of affordable housing, is on the line, and I think he could probably speak to the certainty and kind of the timing of how it works in the real world.
Yes, absolutely, Senator. Thank you. David Paul with Nevada Hand for the record. The certainty of these developments by the time an award is issued and we reach financial closing is I think almost 100%. I think Steve Acroft or Michael Holliday could opine on how many developments have not been completed once you reach that point. As the senator alluded to, this is a very stable industry, and these developments require a number of different financing items, including federal tax credits. So once you get to that point, the project is going to go through. As far as the value of the tax credit, a credit today is definitely worth much more than a credit in 2 or 3 years from now. Just the present value of money and the certainty of knowing that, yes, we have a tax liability today we can use this credit today is very helpful. Something that we ran into with the first award of tax credits is that because the credit can't be awarded or can't be issued or taken by the entity that we sell it to until after the project is completed, we've found that we have to now bridge that financing. So in the case of the development that we're working on, that's $3 million that we have to bridge until those credits are sold, which makes the projects much harder to complete. It also adds significantly to the cost. We are paying interest on those funds, and ultimately ends up costing the state units in production because of added costs and potentially projects. We think it's quite beneficial to have these credits awarded before the project is completed. In the case of affordable housing developers, while we're a very stable industry, providing our own financing for these credits until completion can be challenging and quite costly, and you will end up with fewer companies that are able to utilize the credits and develop projects.
Finally, Madam Chair, my final question will be related to the language inserting the ability to transfer to a subsidiary organization or an affiliated organization. What is the need for that?
So thank you for the question, Senator Kekeffer. This is Senator Ratty for the record. I'm going to go ahead and ask David Paul. Well, yeah, David, does it make sense for you to speak to your experience with this?
Yes, I think so. David Paul for the record. So in our experience, we were selling to a bank that had multiple affiliates that had tax liability, and for them to take the $3 million, they needed to spread it across a number of affiliates for that tax liability. And we've found that to be the case with a number of financial institutions, and we expect that may be the case with other institutions as well, where they have different affiliates that have tax liability. So we think it's quite beneficial to allow for that.
Okay, yeah, I think I maybe misread it originally. I thought it would be the project sponsor transferring credits to one of its own subsidiaries or affiliates, but that's not what it says. It says basically the person that you transfer it to can then transfer it to a sister organization that it owns to spread out the value or the applicability of that across multiple entities.
That's correct.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the leeway.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Senator Severs Gansert.
Thank you, Chair Neal. So just a question about how you determine how many credits to give them. I know it's the last dollars, but sort of what's the process that you go through to be able to determine exactly what to allocate?
Thank you, Senator Gansert. Julie Ratty for the record. Michael, do you want to take that one?
You bet. Thank you, Senator. Michael Holliday for the record, Chief Financial Officer for the Nevada Housing Division. Senator Severs Gansert, basically when we do the underwriting, we do it just like we do with the federal low-income housing tax credits. The developer submits a pro forma. We actually use a third-party financial advisor to help us with the underwriting on that to determine whether it's necessary. And I will tell you that usually where the pushback comes as to whether something is necessary or not is the debt coverage ratio and the amount of funding that the development needs to borrow. So when you calculate their debt coverage ratio for anything that they're going to pay interest on, typically if there's plenty of money there or plenty of capacity for the project to pay back debt, then they maybe don't need the state's money or they don't need layers of subsidy financing. You're typically not going to see that. That's why we were here a session ago asking for that. But that's really the crux to the issue is whether financially their debt coverage ratio, their profitability cash flow going forward for 15 or 30 years is going to be sufficient to support the project. And then that would justify the ask for the tax credits. And then to mention the clawback provision, that's where at the end of the project, when they come in with a certified cost report prepared by an independent CPA firm, we have, again, another bite at the apple to say whether we actually put in too many credits. I will tell you that generally speaking, that's not the case. The costs have gone way up by the time they finish construction. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. That does.
Thank you for that. Members, any other questions? So I had a quick question on, I believe it's page 7. I just wanted to get an example of, this is where your definition of affiliate is in sub 11. What's section 1, sub 11? What would be an example of a person who is indirectly in control that would classify as an affiliate?
Thank you, Senator Neal, Chair Neal, for the question. So there was a lot of conversation between Director Acroth and Russell Ginden and our LCB tax team to get the affiliate language right. And so I would ask either Director Acroth or our LCB team to help chime in on that.
Thank you for that. I had no idea that Mr. Ginden was a part of that.
So this is Steve Acroth, Administrator of the Nevada Housing Division. Basically, as David explained previously, the affiliate is going to be a body somehow wrapped up in the overall corporate structure. I can't answer to the direct or indirect. So that's the language that was provided by LCB. I'll defer to Mr. Ginden on that. If he has an opinion on it.
Thank you. For the record, Russell Ginden, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. I don't know that I'm going to really be able to provide that much more clarity in terms of, as Senator Ratty discussed, we did have meetings with the Housing Division staff, and then that information was, in terms of what the concept was provided to the Legal Division, and this is the language then that they provided that felt met what the Housing Division was supposed to be doing. And this affiliate is comparable to the definition that we use for this term elsewhere in the statutes with regards to as a statutory construct. Not being of the real world, it's hard for me to tell you what would be an actual example of directly or indirectly. But I didn't know if maybe Mr. Paul actually being involved in this stuff, and I'm not trying to continue to pass the hot potato here, but he's in the real world and might have the ability to provide a better example of what the term would mean or be used in actual application for this specific tax credit program.
Thank you, Mr. Ginden. And so we'll give Mr. Paul a shot. And then if he can't do it, I'd like to call on Joe Reel and Michael Nakamoto. I'm just kidding.
Hi. David Paul for the record. Indirect might be a little tough for me to answer, but at least theoretically it could be. You could have a financial institution that is a partner with another financial institution, and they have an entity that's that they've created together, and they may have an indirect control over that new financial entity. So that I think that would be an example. I don't want to use any names of financial institutions, but you could have different companies that have created an entity, and they may have direct or indirect control over that entity. I'm not sure if that helps.
Thank you. And I will just say this for the record. We were very concerned with not wanting to set a precedent with these tax credits that transferable tax credits could be transferred more than once. And so working with Mr. Ginden and his staff who passed on that information to our legal counsel, that really is the intent of this section, is to make sure that, okay, yeah, it might make sense that if you have, a home office and subsidiaries and you don't have enough tax burden in just the home office and you need to pass that tax burden along to your subsidiaries, but you're all really one unit, that makes sense. But what we don't want is for them to become a commodity that can be sold from one business to another, because then the burden on staff of tracking that and making sure that we know where this tax credit is going to show up in the future against the state's budget is an issue. So really probably the best person to answer some of the details in the language would be our Legislative Council Bureau legal staff, because they really spent the time on this section to make sure that that's the intent we were trying to get to.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess we'll follow up with that with Mr. Fernley. As you know, he's busy, because I just wanted to make sure, what's the threshold of indirectly connected? Because that could be a loose affiliation, and then they're receiving the credits. But okay, any additional questions?
And Chair Neal, I think I'm understanding that somehow along the way we didn't get you the amendments. So would you like me to just walk through that verbally? It's relatively simple.
Yes.
And we'd have it on the record?
Yep.
Great. So again, Julia Ratty for the record. So in section 1, sub 6, 4B, where it starts upon completion of the project, we're tightening up that definition to say not less than 45 days before the project is closed, because completion of a project could be a relatively vague term. 4 lines down where it reads, the division shall complete a review of the project, comma, it is now the division shall complete a review of the project and the project sponsor. And then going a couple more lines down where it talks about the declaration of restrictive covenants and conditions. Instead of has been there, the words are will be. Go down to the next subsection 1, where it says determine the appropriate amount of transferable tax credits for the project, which must be the amount the division determines is necessary to make the project financially feasible after all other sources of funding are allocated and paid toward the final cost of the project. We are striking the language indicated in the certification of costs. And then to the next sub 3, the project sponsor shall notify the division upon transferring any transferable tax credits inserting a new line, an entity to which a project sponsor transfers any transferable tax credits may transfer those transferable tax credits to one or more. So we're adding the words or more of its subsidiaries or affiliates and shall notify the division upon making any such transfer. And that or more is, again, because if you do this and they need to spread the tax burden to some of their field offices, one may not cut it. They may need to do it to one or two or three. So we'll get that to you in writing. And my sincere apologies for not having that for you for this hearing, but we'll make sure to make ourselves available to answer any questions on those minor tweaks. None of them are substantive to the content or to the purpose of the bill.
Okay. And we did find the amendment, and I think staff is trying to get it uploaded into the record. Do you have any questions on the amendment, or is everyone good?
Madam Chair, can I visit a different subject?
Go ahead, Senator Kieckeffer.
Thank you. It's probably more of a question for Russell. So I think, or Mr. Ginden, sorry. So I know the bill doesn't actually change the total amount of the credits that are eligible, right? It's still at the $40 million, but it spreads it out sort of indefinite, right? So from an accounting basis, how do we put these into our sort of balance sheets for subsequent biennia?
Thank you. For the record, Russell Ginden, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. You're correct that rather than there now being a specific cutoff date, that it allows the $10 million to be out there until housing can use it up on projects. And so for us as your staff that participates in preparing forecasts for the tax credits that are presented to the Technical Advisory Committee to the Economic Forum, in the Economic Forum, we really don't see it changing anything because like some of the other tax credit programs, we know what the statutory maximum that may be awarded for a fiscal year is, and then we can evaluate what that is in relation to what we start to learn as the tax credit program goes forward. But what we do is we interact with the agencies that are responsible for implementing and administering these tax credit programs to have them provide us information on what's been approved, when do we think those tax credits are going to be awarded if they haven't been. If they have been awarded, then we're talking to the Department of Taxation and Gaming Control Board, depending on what revenue they were pledged against, to see when they will be taken. And so that's to keep track of what's going on in the actual. And then with regard to forecasting, we're working with the same agencies administering the program as to what projects may be in the pipeline. Specifically, if you look at the Economic Forum's forecast, we have $3 million worth of tax credits on the sheets for this program for FY 2022, and then the $10 million for FY 2023, based on conversations that the Fiscal Analysis Division had with the Housing Division back in November to proceed the forecast. So with all that, then, Senator, we really don't see it affecting how we would look at forecasting or tracking this program. The only difference would be, as you pointed out, could the tax credits then be out there longer than they would be under the bill? Yes, possibly, but they could still all be used up in the time frame. And only time will tell as the Housing Division works through this program and we get pre-pandemic type of economic events. So.
Thank you. So you don't anticipate, so nothing in this bill changes the $3 million line item that you have for fiscal year 22?
No, we will certainly, as your staff probably here in about less than a month, be, and I guess this can be in advance notice for Mr. Akeroff and Mr. Holliday, that we will be circling back around with them to ask them that if any information has changed here in April of 2021 compared to what they were telling us in November 2020, as to the expectation for tax credits that will be awarded and it's not just being awarded, but the expectation is that they can be taken. That's what we care about for FY 2020 and FY 23. Excuse me, FY 2022 and FY 23.
Okay, thank you for that. Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and open up for support of SB 284.
Thank you, Chair Neal. To take your place in the queue to testify in support of SB 284, please press star 9 now. Again, to take your place in the queue to testify in support of SB 284, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits, 232. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Dazlich, D-A-Z-L-I-C-H, Director of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber. We'd like to thank Senator Ratty for bringing this bill. We were in support of the original bill for these tax credits last session. These continue to be good, sound policy. We believe that given time to prove out, these tax credits will help to dramatically increase the affordable housing supply in our state. We continue to be in favor and urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 419. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Neal and members of the committee. My name is Benjamin Challinor. That's BenjaminChallinor. And I'm the Policy Director for Faith in Action Nevada. We are here in support of SB 284. First, we would like to thank Senator Ratty for her continual work on the Nevada Affordable Housing Tax Credit. Nevada is in severe need of additional affordable housing units. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, that number is over 80,000 units. And those units are for those who are of extreme low income, whose incomes are at or below the poverty level. SB 284 will look to make sure that we are able to keep the Nevada Affordable Housing Tax Credit in the long term, to make sure if it's something that works and we feel like it will work and will bring in more units into the state, that we can make sure we can continue on this work for future generations. Thank you so much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 601. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
This is Barbara Paulson, B-A-R-B-A-R-A-P-A-U-L-S-E-N, and I'm speaking on behalf of Nevadans for the Common Good. Good afternoon, Senator Neal, committee members, and Senator Ratty. As we know, Nevada has long ranked as one of the states with the least number of affordable housing units for the extremely low-income population, those earning 30% or less of the area median income. For a family of 4, that is an income of $25,750 or less. To put it another way, any household of 4 with one wage earner making less than $12.30 an hour falls into this category. And this is about 21% of Nevada households. So it's not an insignificant number of people who are affected. Has already been stated, the current shortage of affordable housing units in Nevada is over 80,000. This means people, families with children, are struggling to obtain housing that they can afford. And right now, when many lower wage earners are experiencing extreme financial impact of the pandemic, where are those people going to go? Where are they going to find new housing if they have to, that they can afford? And we know that without stable housing and affordable housing, families can't manage other critical needs, such as food security and access to health care and other important services. So this is a very critical issue for the state of Nevada. As we talked about, SB 448 passed in 2019, and we very much applaud Senator Ratty for her work on that bill and her strong support for this bill and her passion for housing issues in general. Nevadans for the Common Good strongly supported Senate Bill 448 in 2019, and we equally support Senate Bill 284 in this session. We urge you to pass this legislation. Thank you for your time.
Again, callers, we are currently taking support for SB 284. If you would like to take your place in the queue to offer support for SB 284, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits, 003. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Eric Novak, ERIC-NOVAK. I'm president of Praxis Consulting Group, which provides development finance assistance to affordable housing developers in Nevada. I'm also the treasurer of the Nevada Housing Coalition. We strongly support the proposed changes to the law related to the transferable state tax credit for affordable housing. SB 284 removes the sunset provision in the law, allowing for more time to use the credit given the pandemic and its effects on gaming revenue. It also includes a couple of technical corrections to the law that will make the credit more attractive to potential investors in affordable housing and result in higher and more reliable pricing. Since the credit was created in the last legislative session, the pressing need for affordable housing in Nevada has only grown. Based on the National Low-Income Housing Coalition 2021 GAP report, which was released 2 weeks ago, Nevada again has the least housing per capita in the country available to both very low-income and extremely low-income households by a wide margin. For us, the real magic of the transferable state tax credit is that it will provide the but-for gap financing to allow tax-exempt bond affordable housing projects to proceed. Based on the success of the Nevada Housing Division pilot GAP program, we know that a relatively small amount of public subsidy can leverage a large amount of private funds in order to produce new affordable housing in the state. The NHD pilot program has resulted in the creation of over 2,500 affordable units in the last 4 years. The private investment would not come to Nevada but for this relatively small infusion of state subsidy. We estimate that the transferable state tax credit with the proposed amendments will similarly result in the production of another 2,500 units of much-needed affordable housing in Nevada. We want to thank again Senator Ratty for bringing forward these changes to the law, which we believe will make the transferable state tax credit more usable and effective, and we urge the committee to support SB 284. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 184. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal and committee members. Matt Walker on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Just calling in to also express our support for Senate Bill 284. I think that the design of as closely matching federal low-income housing tax credit programs as possible makes it predictable and most easily employable to really move the needle and get the maximum impact of this tax credit. And just want to express our thanks to Senator Ratty for all of her hard work on this measure to tackle a really important problem in our communities. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 313. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
For the record, I'm Dawn Christensen, DAWN-CHRISTENSEN, Vice President of Communications and Corporate Responsibility for the Nevada Resort Association. Good afternoon, Chair Neal and committee members. We thank Senator Ratty for bringing this bill forward and appreciate her leadership and work in this area. Affordable housing is an important issue for the resort industry and our workforce. We support SB 284 and the opportunities it allows. Again, thank you, Chairwoman Neal and committee members for the opportunity to share our viewpoint with you, and we appreciate your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 336. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
For the record, this is Phyllis Gergovich, PhyllisGurgevich, and I represent Nevada Bankers Association. Thank you to Chair Neal and committee members for the opportunity to comment and support, and thank you, Senator Ratty, for bringing this bill and all your hard work on this issue. Our bank members are engaged. They're committed to efforts to increase financial literacy among Nevadans, starting with school-age students and following throughout all stages of their financial life. So having affordable housing options is really one of the most important building blocks. Not being able to find housing that meets that 30% of budget recommendation, it just starts a negative chain reaction. So the ability to secure affordable housing means a solid foundation. It means individuals and households can build their spending plans and have a real roadmap that can be followed, allow them to meet their financial needs, but not just their needs. It allows people to also plan and achieve their wants and access and achieve their financial dreams. So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to support SB 284.
Caller with the last three digits, 899. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Christine Hess, CHRISTINEHESS, and I am the Executive Director for the Nevada Housing Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to express our strong support of SB 284 today. Thank you, Senator Ratty, the Nevada Housing Division, and Nevada Hand for your leadership. We agree with all the comments you've heard regarding our affordable housing crisis and would just like to emphasize additionally that affordable housing is economic development in Nevada. Our own children struggle to stay or return home to raise their families and pursue their careers due to a lack of affordable housing. Hardworking Nevadans face housing insecurity that impacts their ability to maintain steady employment or consider advancing workforce skills. And our communities are hampered in attracting new businesses when those firms see the challenge in accessing affordable housing for their workers. The adjustments proposed in SB 284 are critical, and these tax credits will make a tangible difference for Nevada workers and residents. Thank you so much.
If there are any other callers wishing to testify in support of SB 284, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. It appears there are no callers wishing to testify in support of SB 284 at this time.
Okay, so we will move to opposition for SB 284.
If you would like to voice your opposition to SB 284, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 283. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller 283. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Marcos Lopez, Marcos Lopez, Americans for Prosperity, Nevada. Americans for Prosperity strives to create an economy that works for all by empowering people to earn success and realize their potential. But what we're kind of seeing in this debate is no one's really talking about the root cause of the problem, which is housing costs. And what is driving this? We know it's zoning and land use regulation, and we need to do everything we can to address that. The White House Council of Economic Advisors explained this last year when they said that we find the key driver of housing unaffordability problem is the overregulation of housing markets by state and local governments, which limit supply. By driving up home prices, overregulation adversely affects low-income Americans, in particular those who spend the largest share of their income on housing. The National Bureau of Economic Research also is found the same thing in multiple papers. And there's strong evidence that removal of these restrictive and exclusionary zoning regulations is actually what will help our housing crisis and help encourage more construction and more building. And this is where we encourage that we actually focus our attention. And later on, we'll be talking about property taxes. And when we talk about tax reform, some of the things we need to eliminate are tax credit, because that is what negatively impacts what we collect in revenue overall. Thank you.
We are now taking testimony in opposition to SB 284. If you would like to voice your opposition to SB 284, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. It appears there are no other callers to testify in opposition to SB 284.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone who is signed in and neutral for SB 284?
To provide neutral testimony to SB 284, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 555. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hi. Actually, I do not wish to be disclosed, but I was actually calling in on a different matter. But it's regarding the same issue, which are property taxes. The other matter is talking about lifting the cap. This matter is talking about transferring credits to a bank. We're trying to keep our homes here in Southern Nevada. I'm from Las Vegas, and I have a rental home in Senator Neal's district. And, we're looking at this very carefully because, as a single property owner of a rental property, we have a very small margin. And so anyway, regarding this issue, there is, I don't know why we're handing it over to a bank rather than looking to, like the last gentleman said, grow the economy and stimulate things, because tax credits and the poor, they don't have to be poor. We can do things to help them not be poor. But if we hand it out, it's constantly going to be a handout. It never ends, and it grows, and then it costs more for those of us that can't, afford, what we have. It just makes it that much harder. So I would ask everybody to think about that when they vote on these things, because there is a real cost to a tax credit. That means you're taking it from someone else, and it's beyond me what I'm hearing. I just can't believe what I'm hearing here. This is why people get upset. I know you guys want to do the right thing, but this is not the right thing to take from somebody else and give it to a bank so somebody can have assisted housing credits so they can live somewhere, and there's no exit to that. That's not fair to them either. So I would ask everybody really consider this issue as the whole big picture overview that I'm speaking of. Thank you for your time.
Is anyone else in neutral?
If there are any other callers who would like to offer neutral testimony to SB 284, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. It appears there are no other callers wishing to voice neutral testimony to SB 284.
Okay, thank you for that. Senator Ratty, any closing comments on 284?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, Senator Julia Ratty for the record. So I just want to first thank the committee and each of its members for the time and energy you've put into this bill today. As well, I want to thank the Nevada Housing Coalition, the Housing Division, Nevada Hand, who's been here today to help and has helped along the way, and many others who have put their time and energy towards making sure that we're getting this to a program that works. I did just want to briefly talk about the need. I think it's probably important to end there. in a basic economic curve, we're going to have always a portion of our society that isn't going to be able to compete on a supply and demand market-based economy. And for many of these low-income housing tax credits and the projects that are built for them, they're serving folks who are, as an example, a senior citizen who has worked their entire life. They have been able to pay for housing for a good chunk of their life, but now they are on a fixed income of $1,000 a month from their Social Security check, and the housing market is outstripping their Social Security. We've seen increases in property values upwards of 20% in 1 year in Washoe County, and we all know that a Social Security check does not go up that rapidly. And so for that senior citizen, for that person with a disability who's on a fixed income, for that family who is in a community college or a workforce development program and is working their way towards higher earning power, but for now cannot afford rent, these projects are the safety net to make sure that people are housed. And I want to emphasize the need. Nevada is very, very, very far behind. So for every 100 low-income individuals, like the individuals that I just described, we only have 40 units. For every extremely low-income individual, we only have 18 for every 100 that we need. So 18% for extremely low income, 40% for low income. I disagree heartily with the sentiments that we heard at the end of the testimony that somehow that these are a handout and not a hand up, because frankly, if you can't take care of your housing, which is your basic necessity, you're not going to be able to take care of your health, your education, your workforce training, everything else that you need to move up the socioeconomic ladder. And there's just a reality that unfortunately some Nevadans, either because they are seniors at the end of their working life or peoples with disabilities who are having challenges to be able to obtain work, are going to need some of our help. And this is a program that will help us help more of them. So I ask for your support and hope that I can count on your vote on SB 284. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will go ahead and close the hearing on SB 284, and we will open the hearing on SB 10. We will call NACO up.
Good afternoon. Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, thank you so much for hearing this bill today, SB 10. My name is Dagny Stapleton. I am the Executive Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties, and I have a presentation for you all, and I'll go to that now. Can everyone see my presentation? Okay, so again, I want to thank the chair for being willing to hear this bill. With me today are Lyon County Comptroller Josh Foley and Clark County CFO Jessica Colvin. Jessica and Josh are here to help me with any technical questions that I'm not able to answer. SB 10 makes a very small change to Nevada's property tax calculation. For all Nevada's counties, property taxes are either the primary or secondary source of revenue, making them critical to the services that counties provide to all Nevadans. Property taxes are also an important source of revenue for Nevada's schools. Existing law provides for a partial abatement of property taxes through an annual cap on increases of property tax bills. As most taxpayers understand it, those annual caps on how much property tax bills can increase are 3% for residential properties and 8% for commercial. SB 10 fixes a piece of the formula that was added at the 11th hour prior to the creation of the caps in 2005, and that we believe has had unintended consequences. In limited instances, the 3% and 8% caps actually drop below 3% and can go as low as 0. In FY17, for example, a year when the economy was strong and property values grew, in some counties, taxpayers had the property taxes they paid capped at 0.2%, so almost at 0. This significantly reduced overall tax collections in that year and lowered the property tax base in future years. Without the fix provided in SB 10, This scenario will likely occur again. In fact, it will occur in some counties to a smaller extent next year. SB 10 would make one simple change, and that is removing the ability of the standard 3% and 8% property tax caps to fall below 3%. Importantly, this change will affect very few property tax payers next year, and in many years it may have no impact in that year. That said, what it will do is provide additional stability, predictability, and equity for Nevada's local governments, school districts, special districts that rely on property taxes to provide core services to Nevadans. Property tax, as I mentioned, is a critical revenue source for all counties, making up anywhere from just over 20% to almost 60% in some counties of county general fund revenue. Property taxes are similarly important revenue for cities and school districts. The mechanism in the property tax formula that allows the tax caps to move between 0% and 3 and 8% is commonly referred to as the secondary cap. It was added as the caps were being passed in 2005, and it includes in that formula 2 times the Consumer Price Index, CPI, and the 10-year average of the growth of assessed valuations of property in each county. Since FY06, the caps have dropped under 3% for select counties in only 4 years, with the majority of instances coming in fiscal year 17 and 18. At that time, the tax cap calculation was heavily influenced by the large real estate value declines years before that during the housing crisis. The table here illustrates how the caps are calculated using the secondary cap. This is from 2017. You can see it's this largely unknown calculations that allows property tax growth to occasionally be capped below 3% and down even to 0. The column that is important to look at here is the one furthest to the right, the general cap. 2017 is the year when the lowest caps occurred since the formula went into place. As you can see, 9 of Nevada's 17 counties had tax caps below 3%, 6 of those at 0.2%. The secondary cap creates an issue of predictability and stability. The projected caps for the next fiscal year are announced by the Department of Taxation around March of each year. As counties are building their budgets for the next fiscal year, what can and has happened is that county revenue can be suddenly reduced as a result of those caps dropping. SB 10 would ensure that the annual cap on increases to property taxes cannot fall below 3%. SB 10 simply ensures that where property values are rising, property tax collections are not artificially limited by a mathematical formula such that a property owner that experienced a 10% increase in property value and may have a comparable increase in what they owe in taxes would not be capped at 3%, but instead capped even lower at 1%, 0.2%, or even 0%. So it would prevent that. Now, I'd like to direct the committee's attention to this table, which is also up on Nellis, I believe. It shows historically for each county what the caps have been. And I'm going to zoom in just so everybody can see. Hope everybody can see that. If you take a look at this, you'll see that there are only a few years that the caps drop below 3%. Those years are highlighted in orange, and that this has not occurred in all counties. In 2011, Mineral County's property tax bills were prohibited from growing more than 0.3%. And then in 2017, as we just discussed, 9 counties dropped below 3%, 6 to almost 0, including Clark and Washoe. Then in 2018, we saw a similar occurrence. And then in 2022, next year, this will occur again for 5 rural counties. For FY23 and beyond, this chart is a great tool to get a sense of the history of where the caps have gone and may go. So again, you can see that it's only in those outlier years that more property tax revenue may be realized. Over the past 16 years since this formula was put in place, the caps have dropped below 3% only these handful of times. However, 2017 was especially impactful, which we'll talk about in a moment, and that's part of what we're trying to prevent happening again in this bill. Here's a little more detail on the projected caps for FY22 for this next year. Though SB 10 would not go into effect until FY23, 5 counties in fiscal year 22 are projected to to have tax cap factors under 3%. I want to note also that we learned that the final caps for fiscal year 22 were just released, and that it's actually 4 counties, not 5, that are under 3%. White Pine County comes off this list, so just wanted to note that discrepancy. These numbers were built off the projected preliminary cap numbers that we had received last month. So it's also important to note that when a county's tax cap drops under 3%, the fiscal impacts are compounded in subsequent years, as the lower revenue base in a low cap year reduces the foundation of potential revenue growth, even if the caps rise to maximum levels in the next year. I wanted to provide this historic example for one individual county, for Washoe County, for the committee. This is how the cap varied over the last decade in Washoe. You can see the really irregular trajectory of the cap, and can imagine for all counties how this impacts the ability to project revenue and associated services. I also want to note that it was the recession years that really pulled the caps down because of the decrease in assessed values, because the secondary formula is based on a 10-year average. However, the way that the formula works, the cap bottoming out did not happen during the recession, did not happen during those years, but years later, during the continuing recovery, when local governments were trying to recoup revenues lost during the recession and meet the demand for growing services. Anecdotally, this is a really important example of why SB 10 is needed. Were there another continued dip in the housing market that caused assessed values to decline in those years following, that could again pull the cap down in years not necessarily correlated with decreased economic factors, and suddenly could again impact local government revenue. I briefly want to talk about what I know each of the members of this committee are very familiar with, and that is the effect of the tax caps overall and the abatements that have been created by those caps. The issue that SB 10 is trying to address, of course, compounds this, but it is important to note the overall effect of caps in Nevada, and also that SB 10 does not propose to remove these caps. So what this slide shows in the first table are actual local property tax revenues in green, and in gray the abated amounts created by the caps, the amount that taxpayers were not asked to pay. The table to the right shows those abatements over time. During the Great Recession, housing prices dropped dramatically, as did assessed values and in turn property tax revenue. And as the economy began to recover, however, property tax revenue did not, because of the caps on how much property tax bills could increase and the new base value to which they have dropped. Because of this, some local governments have still not recovered to pre-recession revenue or staffing levels. So I want to note here the abatements in FY17, including the effects again of the secondary cap formula, were about $700 million. Roughly 40% of those abated tax payments would have otherwise been distributed to school districts throughout the state. This year, the state of Nevada will abate more than $1 billion in property taxes, while total collections are roughly on par with what they were a decade ago. So briefly, I want to use this slide to illustrate what I've referenced as the compounding effect of the secondary cap based on the FY17 tax cap of 0.2%. In years where property taxes would have grown and are capped at a very low level due to the formula, the amount upon which the cap is applied that next year remains at that same level, and any growth in that next year again begins at a lower point. So for example, in 2016, the dark green line shows that if a $300,000 home would have paid $3,000 in property taxes and a 3% cap was applied, you can see that that projected growth in revenue over the next 10 years. Look then to the olive colored line, which reflects the effect of the secondary cap dropping to essentially zero in 2017, and the compounding impact of that over the following years. Because of that almost 0% cap, the tax bill is again at approximately $3,000 in 2017. It was not allowed to grow at all. If we then assume, as has occurred so far, that the cap is back at 3% in the following years, the collections are still lower in every subsequent year due to what happened in 2017. This compounding effect means that what happens that what appears to be a one-year outlier can actually impact tax collections and the provision of services, of course, for years into the future. And this is part of what SB 10 proposes to fix. Oh, and I just realized I was on the wrong slide. This slide shows a similar effect. I hope that all made sense to everyone. This slide shows a similar effect on an example of commercial property and how essentially rebasing the amount of the tax paid in the year when the cap went to zero compounds and affects future years as well. So finally, I want to talk about the actual fiscal impacts of the caps going below 3% and how SB 10 would have or could change that in the future. Depending on the consumer price index and the growth or lack of growth over an average of 10 years of the assessed values of properties in a county's cap in future years could drop below 3%. In those years, if SB 10 were in place, the cap would be kept at 3% instead of below that, and the impact on taxpayers could be that percentage difference between 3% and what the cap dropped to. If, in fact, those caps dropped below 3% in years when property tax revenue would have increased. Because we aren't very good at predicting the caps, we don't know what those numbers will be, the numbers of the caps. However, we have an example and one projection that we hope will help the committee to think about this. The first example shows the impact on the left of the slide if SB 10 had been in place in 2017. $69 million in additional revenue was abated in that year due to the cap going below 3% in those 9 counties. This is the year that we really do not want repeated, where property tax bills are capped at nearly zero. Then to the right on this slide, as SB 10 is written, it would actually go into effect in FY23. However, if it was in effect for this next fiscal year, FY22, then if the projected 5 counties that have a cap below 3% were instead kept at 3%, the effect would be minimal. And actually almost negligible amount compared to the more than $7 billion in statewide property tax collections. The impact to taxpayers in FY22, if SB 10 were in place, would actually be just a little over $100,000 spread over 5 counties. And I would add that, though, due to the caps dropping below 3% in those counties, which they will do, that compounding issue illustrated in the previous slides will also occur. And property tax bills will be a little lower as well. And this is true even if in future years those caps are back up to 3%. We would stress the point that if we don't have a lot of years where average assessed property values decline, that it's likely that the cap will not be pulled down below 3%, and it's possible that SB 10 may have no impact in future years. On the other hand, however, it's the fear of another recession that in part drives the need for this bill. If assessed values do drop, there is the potential that those caps could go back down to zero, destabilizing local governments and in turn those critical services that they provide. In closing, I want to say that this secondary formula is creating uncertainty and has created additional abatements in years where they were not needed, while affecting counties' abilities to rebuild revenues that were devastated during the Great Recession. And just a reminder that SB 10 does not increase the tax rate, nor does it remove the standard 3% and 8% caps that protect taxpayers from property tax increases above those levels. Finally, we want to recognize that this is a very minor fix to Nevada's complex and some say antiquated property tax formula. It's a technical fix, as we say. We are certainly not arguing that larger changes may not ultimately be needed, but it is our perspective that this technical fix is an important first step to protect and stabilize property tax for Nevada's local governments going forward and to eliminate the potential for years like 2017 to be repeated in the future. Thanks again to the committee for allowing me to present, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that. Members, any questions on SB 10? Okay, so no questions on SB 10. I guess like Groundhog Day. Okay, so we will open up for support for SB 10.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support of SB 10, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, if you would like to testify in support of SB 10, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller 1250. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller 250, please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Michael Mears, M-E-A-R-S. And good afternoon, Chair Neal and members of the committee. I am the county assessor in Eureka County, and today I'm representing Eureka County. I'd like to be clear that I'm not representing my colleagues of the Nevada Assessors Association. I believe our association is neutral on this bill at this time. I want to thank NACO for bringing the proposal forward, and I'm thankful I had the opportunity to work with NACO on a working group as we were considering the language for SB 10. For a little context, I was at the legislature in 2005 when we were crafting the language for AB 489, which established the property tax caps that we're talking about today. And at the time, property values were skyrocketing in Nevada and especially in Clark County. And Assessor Mark Schofield from Clark County was concerned that property tax or property homeowners in his county, specifically seniors on fixed incomes, were going to potentially be taxed right out of their homes. And so the AB 489 came forward, and the result of the legislation at the end of the day was the 3% residential owner-occupied cap and then the 8% or up to 8% alternative cap for all other properties. So SB 10, all we're looking to do here is set a floor on the caps at that 3% residential level. And keeping in mind that the caps are on the actual property taxes and not on the actual assessed value of the property, for counties like Eureka County and Pershing County this year, who are looking at a 2.4% overall cap, if SB 10 was in place this year, it would have an impact on our counties. In Eureka County, for example, even though it's only a 0.6% difference, that difference is $63,000 of property tax revenue, and that's an employee in our budget. I would assume that it would be similar for other counties as well. And as Dagny pointed out, because the caps are on the prior year property taxes, when we have a cap that drops below the 3% level, even if the caps rebound next year to their full amounts of, say, 3 and 8%, we're still only growing off of that prior year that was capped at 2.4%. So we never actually catch up in terms of lost property tax revenue. Anyways, again, thank you, Chair Neal and committee members, for letting me speak today. Eureka County supports SB 10. We believe the 3% floor does provide some stability for state and local government revenue projections going forward, and it does not dramatically impact our property taxpayers because the majority of them are still going to experience the 3% benefit of the residential owner-occupied cap. We urge your support. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 718. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Neal and Vice Chair Ratty, for allowing my statement of support. My name is Wesley Harper, W-E-S-L-E-Y-H-A-R-P-E-R. I am the Executive Director of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. The League is in support of SB 10, and we appreciate the work of the Nevada Association of Counties to bring this bill forward. And we appreciate the distinguished members of the Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development for hearing it. This bill is a thoughtful and needed adjustment to existing property tax law. Nevada's property tax laws do not provide a consistent, stable, or predictable source of revenue for Nevada's counties, municipalities, school districts, and special districts. And the proposed bill would alleviate an aspect of these dynamics. However, it should not be seen as a comprehensive solution to the multifaceted defects in Nevada's property tax policy. That said, This is needed legislation. As stated by Executive Director Stapleton, this bill does not increase the tax rate, nor does it remove the tax caps that protect taxpayers from shocking increases. It provides a floor that would create a more stable revenue environment for counties, municipalities, school districts, and special districts. Now, additionally, there is a need for a full and complete study of Nevada's present, expected, and emerging revenue sources and a strategic analysis to determine if our overall tax policy is optimally correlated to that revenue and, within this construct, how our property tax policy is positioned and whether or not it is constructed in the best interest of the residents of our state. Again, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your attention and for allowing my statement of support.
Caller with the last three digits, 588. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 588. If you're having difficulty unmuting yourself, you may press *6. When you've achieved that, please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. I'm going to move to the next caller. I will return to you. Caller with the last three digits, 220. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christopher Rose. That's CHRISTOPHER. Rose, ROSE, with Strategies 360. We're representing Churchill County. Churchill County supports Senate Bill 10. As noted, the changes contained in the bill do not increase the tax rate, nor do they remove the standard 3% and 8% caps that protect taxpayers from property tax increases above those percentages. The proposal protects and stabilizes property tax revenue for Nevada's local governments going forward, and we hope members will support this measure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next. PPS, is anyone in support?
Yes, Chair Neal. Caller with the last three digits, 560. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal and members of the committee. My name is Karen Shea, CARYNESHEA, and I am testifying on behalf of Hope for Nevada, a nonprofit public education advocacy organization with over 1,000 members. We support the efforts by Nevada's counties to address the same situation that has plagued our public school districts for several years. Due to the loss of local taxes incurred by legislation around the Great Recession, public schools are still not funded at pre-recession levels, and if we do not address this immediately, it will only compound the millions of dollars already lost for student support, as well as the resources that run our municipalities. Chair Neal has commented in prior presentations this session asking municipalities to be conservative in their budgeting. While this legislation is not predicted to provide any substantial revenue, it will at the very least provide for more and necessary predictability to accomplish budget forecasting. We also support this as a means to provide more stability in funding for our children's schools. As this legislation is in reality a tweak to previous legislation that has created immense hardships for public entities supporting the needs of Nevadans, we ask that you pass it swiftly and begin the larger and more pressing task of finding meaningful solutions towards stable and sufficient funding for our children's public education. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 927. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hello,
And thank you, Committee Chairwoman Neal and committee members. My name is Hava Ahmed, H-A-W-A-H-A-H-M-A-D, and I am here representing the Clark County Education Association. The Clark County Education Association is the official bargaining partner for the Clark County School District and represents more than 18,000 licensed professionals in Clark County School District. We are the largest independent teachers union in the country and in the state of Nevada, and we engage in bipartisan advocacy for advancing public education in Nevada. Most importantly, we know that the K-12 education delivery system is key to economic development and diversification and workforce development in Nevada. CCEA is testifying in support of Senate Bill 10. When we have an economy dependent on a regressive sales tax to fund our schools and services, and counties where our median home price is over $400,000, we must ask why we are the only state with a depreciating property tax with this type of abatement. This bill provides a great first step to reassess our out-of-date property tax calculation, though we must note that this is only a beginning point. Realistically, we have an opportunity to reevaluate our tax structure to take the burden off of what is argued to be our working class and place the burden on individuals who can afford it. Homes are not bought without taxes in mind. And though we are in a housing crisis for affordable housing, we cannot ignore that we have an influx of home buyers who are expecting better services and schools than we can offer them. Every legislative session, we debate how to stretch a dollar versus being realistic and discussing the fact that as taxpayers, we do not pay nearly as much as we should. We are not in a position to continue the course that we are on unless we want to continue to risk the well-being and education of our students. Though this increase does not directly impact our schools, it will directly impact our counties, the individuals currently charged with providing services like fire and services for the homeless. We understand that property taxes and revenue in general is a difficult conversation. However, we must have this conversation and know that if we choose not to reform our tax structure, that we will have to compromise our services and features of our students. CCEA is in support of this bill, but we know that together we can come up with a better fix than focusing purely on abatements. We can come up with a tool that will not negatively impact individuals currently in their homes, that will capitalize on the influx of new Nevadan residents in support of all of our services and schools. Until then, we are in support of this bill. We look to seeing this bill move to the next committee and are looking forward to the record that will be created. So at the end of the day, we remember that our services and our students are not just campaign talking points. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 666. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Neal, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, W-A-R-R-E-N, last name Hardy, H-A-R-D-Y, calling in today in support of SB 10 on behalf of the Urban Consortium, which is made up of the cities of Las Vegas, Henderson, Reno, and Sparks. I'd like to associate myself with the comments of League of Cities Director Wesley Harper. I think he stated perfectly our position on this bill. We believe that SB 10 is an incremental but very important step in the process of making the corrections that are required in our tax cap system. And particularly, we endorse the recommendation of the League that we conduct a comprehensive study of Nevada's revenue system. I don't think that's been done since the early 80s or the mid 80s at least. And I think it's time, Madam Chair, that we take that task on again. And this should be central to that study and that discussion. So thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of SB 10.
Caller with the last three digits, 109. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison, Justinharrison, representing Clark County. I'll be brief in my remarks as those before me have stated many of the reasons of our support for the bill, but SB 10 would remove the ability of the standard 3% and 8% property tax caps to fall below 3%, and provide additional stability and predictability for Nevada's local governments. For those reasons and those stated before, we're here in support and would urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 087. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal, Vice Chair Ratty. For the record, this is Jared Luke, Jaredluke, Director of Government Affairs for the City of North Las Vegas. In interest of time, Chair, I will just echo many of the comments already made in support and add that Senate Bill 10 will add some stability for municipalities to be able to predict appropriate forecasts and thus ensuring the stability and the ability to provide essential services. Thank you, Chair, for the time.
Caller with the last three digits, 411. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, this is Lindsay Anderson, LINDSAYANDERSON, on behalf of the Washoe County School District. As school districts are the primary beneficiaries of property tax, Washoe County School District is in full support of Senate Bill 10. This is a common sense approach to ensure a more stable source of revenue for school districts. It's even more important as we move to a pupil-centered funding plan that no longer guarantees revenues to districts. We believe it would help move toward ensuring that districts are still able to meet the needs of our students, especially during times of economic hardship, when schools may play an important role in providing our students' basic needs. We ask for your support of this legislation as a piece of the property tax puzzle moving forward. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 588. If you would like to voice support for SB 10, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Then state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Okay. Caller with the last three digits, 419. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Neal, members of the committee. Again, my name is Benjamin Challoner. That's BenjaminChallonor, and I am the Policy Director for Faith in Action Nevada. And we are here in support of SB 10. We would like to echo the sentiments of the speakers before me, many of which come from rural communities, especially that it brings in stability to our counties and our local governments. One thing that I do want to mention is that we must take a look at our long-term revenue streams and sources to make sure that we are providing a more reliable revenue source for our education, for our health services, our mental health services, and our other social services that the state, the local, and state and local governments provide. Thank you so much for your time.
If there are any other callers wishing to voice support for SB 10, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. It appears there are no other callers wishing to voice support for SB 10 at this time.
Okay, so let's open up for opposition to SB 10.
If you would like to voice opposition to SB 10, then please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 842. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
My name is David Gibbs, DAVID, GIBBS. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in opposition to SB 10. I find it noteworthy that everybody who spoke in favor of this bill is a user of our tax dollars, and except for on an individual basis as homeowners, not providers. One of the things that I find interesting is that you talked about the fact of having a stable and predictable revenue streamline. Well, property taxes have a tendency to go down in the middle of a recession. And at the time that that's happening, a lot of these people who are homeowners do not have a stable and or predictable income. So they're facing a lot of the same problems as an individual level. And doing away with this reduction below 3% doesn't necessarily help their cause. In addition, you also talked about the fact that a lot of entities are still playing catch-up as a result of the times that it did drop below 3%. Well, those folks who are paying these taxes, some of them are also still trying to play catch-up. And in a recession, it becomes unpredictable and makes it even sometimes more difficult for folks to catch up. For example, right now, they've been doing a moratorium on rents and on mortgages because people in the pandemic have been having problems with employment and paying their bills. Well, that's eventually going to end, and some of these folks are going to have to play catch-up, and it's going to be difficult for them to do so. Anything that has the potential for increasing their taxes is going to complicate their situation, and especially those who are in the middle and lower end of the income spectrum. So I ask that you vote against SB 10 in order to protect those folks who have unstable and unpredictable incomes. And I understand the penalty, or the pain rather, that it causes the government entities in trying to have a stable, predictable income. But, they're not doing anything different than the average taxpayer out on the street has to deal with. Thank you for your time. People in the pandemic have been having problems with employment and paying their bills.
Caller with the last three digits, 431. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 431. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Yes, this is Thomas Gadossi. ThomasGhidossi. And first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And I, like the other caller, had noted, find it very interesting that 100% of the callers in support of the bill are government entities and or use the funds rather than contribute toward the funds. I, on the other hand, am a retired senior citizen farmer. Whether that makes any difference or not, I don't know. But as I read bill number SB 10, the wording of which is a little confusing. So I've done some research on it, and currently we have a tax cap of 3% on increases on taxes on our residents. And this was placed in law in order to protect us from runaway property tax increases. Prior to that, we were getting roughly a double tax on our home every 5 years. The 3% cap has been nice, and it's currently based on inflation and also on the assessed property values. But if this Senate bill goes in, that goes away. And what happens is that the government or the people that get the tax money would be just guaranteed of a 3% increase every year, whether it's justified or not. The tax cap is a good thing for homeowners in Nevada, and it gives us a little peace of mind. And with the elimination of the formula for calculating the increase, it's not a good thing for Nevadans, and I think it's just plain wrong. As a senior citizen, we worry that the constant increases in property taxes, along with other fees such as sewer, water, etc., will eventually force us to sell our house in order to pay the taxes. And why would that be okay? Wouldn't it be better to work on some protections for us senior citizens that would limit these increases and do something to help us rather than hurt us as individuals? I would urge you to vote no and 86 this confusing bill and not support Senate Bill number 10. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last three digits, 373. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Bob Russo, and that's spelled B-O-B-R-U-S-S-O, and I oppose Senate Bill 10. Increasing the cap on property taxes is not a wise choice, especially during the rough economic times we are experiencing today. Many people have lost their jobs, and others have had their hours significantly reduced. And many businesses have gone belly up due to the forced lockdowns. Plus, we are entering a period of higher inflation that will be economically challenging for everyone. An increase in commercial property taxes will be passed on to the Nevada consumer as a rise in the cost of goods and services. This will be especially trying for lower-income Nevadans who can barely make ends meet. It'll also be tough on senior citizens on a fixed income. And small businesses could continue to go under with the extra burden of higher property taxes that they are unable to pay. Now, the same goes for homeowners who are struggling to pay their mortgages during these distressed times. More taxes could force them out of their homes. There's one thing that increasing taxes always does. It slows down the economy because people have less disposable income. When people have less money, they spend less. Higher taxes also discourage new investing. The risk versus reward is simply too great to take. So I urge you to do the right thing for the citizens of Nevada that you represent and oppose Senate Bill 10. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last three digits, 980. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Al Lasso, A-L-L-A-S-S-O, and I'm a citizen of Nevada for the last 30 years. The citizens of Nevada elect our representatives because we believe that when bills come up for a vote, they will use logic and common sense as well as the best interests of our state and its residents when they decide how to vote on these bills. I would hope that you will do the same thing with SB 10. We are just coming out of an unprecedented pandemic, and Nevada was one of the hardest hit states in the country. We still have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. The entire Strip, the engine of our economy, and one of the largest employers in the state, was shut down for months. The amount of citizens of this great state who are behind on their mortgages at least 30 days is well over 10%. And with the moratorium on rental payments, landlords cannot even pay most of their taxes on their rented properties. The state budget is actually in better shape than is being described. Despite the pandemic, the governor is proposing spending $9.2 billion for the next 2 years of budgets. For perspective, in 2019, before the coronavirus pandemic, the legislature approved $8.88 billion in spending. So we're spending more in this budget than before the pandemic. And Nevada is also allocated $1.25 billion from the CARES Act. So to consider raising property taxes when Nevadans are still suffering the economic hardship created by the emergency shutdown and at the same time increasing the state's budget seems to be, in a sense, wanting to punish the very citizens of this state who voted you all in. What about as an alternative, actually cutting some spending? When a downturn comes, private sector businesses and individuals, we have to reevaluate budgets. We have to cut back on things until things get better. Why is it our elected representatives can't do the same thing with our state budget? At the very least, SB 10 puts another tax burden on the people who are already hurting and suffering due to the COVID-19 shutdown. When you have a government that is working against the interests and the vitality of its citizens it serves, that's a problem. And historically, we know how that leads to the demise and destruction of those they are trying to govern. Please do not do that to the citizens of this great state when we're finally beginning to open up and see a light at the end of this pandemic hell that we've all been through. This is not the time. Please vote no on SB 10. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 967. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hello, for the record, my name is Laniqua McLeod. That's LANIQUA, last name McLeod, MCCLOUD. And calling because I am in opposition of SB 10. I think that everyone else should be as well. As a potential or future home buyer, I do not see how this would benefit me, with being that this current market that we already have due to the pandemic has already gone down and it's going to continue to go down. So if you're going to tell me that you pretty much are going to have the right on how you want to appraise the home that I'm going to buy and invest in, I don't believe that is the right that you should actually have. So I hope that you oppose this. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 678. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 678. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Yes, hi, my name is Luis Vega. I'm representing Concerned Veterans for America. And I, well, first, thank you, Chair Neal and members of the committee, for giving me this opportunity to testify. I am in opposition of SB 10. And I just got to tell you right now, I mean, you look at the country and you wonder why so many veterans come to Nevada, with almost 300,000 in population here, making over 10%. They come for low property taxes. They come for less regulation. And they like their peace. They like living in the world. They love living in Clark County too. But this is going to drive them away. This is going to drive investments away, businesses away. It's going to drive people who are coming from other states seeking these benefits that we have, this at least common sense property tax that we have, away when you're hiking it up in the worst time possible. As everyone said, I just, ditto what they said. We're struggling with COVID. Now's not the time. And I mean, instead of helping spur economic growth, you're just burdening us with more taxes and more regulation. You're hurting the Nevadans, as they said, the ones that are voting you in here. There's an insatiable appetite right now for overspending, increasing taxes, when it should be the opposite. When it should be, well, let's cut wasteful spending. Let's ease the burden on the end user, which is Nevadans. I sincerely urge you to oppose SB 10 in its entirety, and I thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 751. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Wiz Razard, Director of Grassroots Operation with Americans for Prosperity. I call in opposition of SB 10. You know, several years ago, I sat there in Clark County when they were voting on the Raider Stadium. Literally over $750 million. They said it wasn't going to be taxpayers. Last year, with the pandemic, they ended up pulling another $11.2 million from their reserve funds. More importantly, they also included in there that should there not be a room tax that covers that cost, it is the taxpayers across the entire county that covers that cost through listing it as a general obligation. This bill here should only be amended and striked to ensure that counties like Clark County do not engage in wasteful spending and cronyism. This bill should also address municipalities like City of Henderson, who also passed these type of wasteful spendings when they ended up approving $1.2 million funding to a hockey arena in the midst of a pandemic. Counties do not have a revenue issue. They have a wasteful spending issue. And the fact that we're addressing assessments, appraisals on properties to try to accommodate this and not addressing the wasteful spending is pretty concerning. And I hope every organization, every individual that supported the revenue for this SB 10 can also show up and make sure wasteful spending is not happening, so that when emergencies do occur, that we have it in our reserves to deal with our fiscal responsibilities. So I urge everyone here to vote against SB 10. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 859. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Janine Hansen, the state chairman of the Independent American Party, JANINEHANSEN. We oppose SB 10, which will increase property taxes. SB 10 puts homeowners' property tax cap at 3% and commercial and rental property at 8%. Because of the emergency, some people have already lost their homes and businesses. According to the Institute for Policy Innovation in the United States, the total U.S. tax burden, including federal, state, and local taxes and hidden taxes, is equal to 56% of annual personal consumption spending. In other words, taxes consume 56% of all the average person spends. This includes 19% in state taxes and 13% in local taxes. 56% is more than a person spends on housing, food, healthcare, transportation, education, and recreation combined. How can we possibly take care of ourselves and our family when government takes 56% of our income? Businesses don't pay taxes. They pass them on to consumers in the price of goods and services. Just as will happen in SB 10, businesses will pass the increased property taxes on to consumers and renters. Business taxes will become part of the hidden taxes we don't see. In the United States, there are $657 billion in additional hidden taxes, or $2,462 in hidden taxes per person. For instance, for a cheap loaf of bread that costs $1.14, taxes account for 35 cents of the cost. And for a can of soda at 50 cents, 18 cents go toward taxes. There are many hidden taxes. My brother had a roofing company in Sparks. He would tell people if the roof cost $10,000, that half of that $5,000 was in taxes, fees, and regulations. If we could see all the hidden taxes plus the others we pay, we would understand that we are not free, but we are tax slaves to the government. The state of Nevada received $4.5 billion in COVID relief money. Use that money instead of raising taxes. Nevada was one of the hardest hit states, suffering up to 30% unemployment. Why are you raising taxes when people have lost their jobs, their homes, and their businesses? How can Nevadans ever catch up? We hear of a giant sucking sound, that is the government taking ever more money out of our pockets. Consider helping us afford our housing by not increasing the property taxes. And one way you can cut spending and significantly improve the quality of education is by instituting choice in education, which, because of the unions, the teachers' union, you have refused to do. So thank you, and vote against SB 10.
BPS, is anyone else signed in opposition?
Yes, Chair Neal, there are several callers.
So we will keep the testimony to 2 minutes. If someone else has already said what you said, which is I hate SB 10, then it's perfectly fine to say ditto.
Thank you, Chair. I will continue. Caller with the last three digits, 504. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
My name is Brittany Sheehan, BrittanYSheehan, and I appreciate a lot of the comments I just heard. In this committee, we just heard a bill about selling tax credits to support low-income housing, and those tax credits were going to be sold to banks. And now the agenda item is to increase the cap on property taxes. So Nevada's economy, as you know, is still reeling from the economic impacts of the pandemic. And for me to hear the school districts and teachers union call in support, claiming that the school's role in providing for students' basic needs is critical, comes off a little tone deaf, since the schools have done less for our students in the past year than any other time of our lives. CCSD itself has a multi-billion-dollar budget, and the state did get $4.5 billion recently in COVID relief. So I don't think that this is appropriate, especially at this time. I heard another comment that was, quote, we should capitalize on the influx of new Nevada residents. And I find that to be a disgusting thing to say in our legislature, and that we should be asking why they choose to come to Nevada at all and how we can make good on those promises to them and encourage new residents who are fleeing other circumstances. So I implore the committee to oppose this bill, and I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 500. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. John Leleu, L-E-L-E-U, here today representing NAOP in opposition to SB 10. I think it's appropriate to begin this conversation in a place where we agree. Nevada's tax system is antiquated, it is cumbersome, it hurts Nevadans. But that being said, a study has been done regarding Nevada's revenue stream, and in fact, several members of this very committee sat through a presentation in 2017 over 2 days where the Nevada's tax system was brought out. And from that joint subcommittee meeting, SJR 14 in 2017 came out, and NAOP was the only association that was in support of SJR 14. In fact, a senator who is no longer a member of this body openly questioned whether I even represented NAOP when I publicly supported SJR 14. But SJR 14 was supported by NAOP on the condition that future comprehensive discussions were going to happen in the interim regarding a full reform of Nevada's property tax system. And despite NAOP's efforts to assemble stakeholders in the interim, no one would speak with us, not local government, not trade associations. Once the legislature was over in 2017, no one wanted to talk to us about a real property tax reform. So in 2019, when SJR 14 came back, NAOP just didn't support it, didn't oppose it, but didn't support it. Now, SJR 14 is back this session as SJR 8, and we'll see what happens with that. But I think it's also important to note that in 2017, AB 43 was presented, and that bill attempted to place a floor on property tax caps as well. And NAOP similarly opposed AB 43 because such was a partial fix and didn't reform the system. AB 43 is very similar to SB 10. It's just a floor. It doesn't cure any revenue deficiency. It doesn't raise taxes, as we've heard today. That's not what SB 10 does, and that's not what SB 43 did. It doesn't raise taxes. But it's important to note that we are facing a revenue deficiency in local government. Our agencies are facing a revenue deficiency, and Nevadans are being hurt. This session, proponents of two bills, AB 331 and AB 334, are saying additional fees are necessary because Nevada's property tax system is broken. We agree. The property tax system in Nevada is broken. It doesn't work. It's not modern. And we can say that without even knowing for sure whether the revenue is necessary. Now, for 6 years, Nevada has completely failed to address the root cause of these issues and has instead chosen partial fixes, starts, gimmicks, Band-Aids. And the governments and the agencies continue to say they're broke. Obviously, what we're doing isn't working. Nevadans deserve a full discussion on this issue. They deserve a comprehensive tax reform. And so because of that, and really only because of that, we agree with the intent of SB 10, but because Nevadans deserve a comprehensive tax fix, and because NAOP has always been there wanting to have that discussion, we oppose SB 10. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 621. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller, it appears you are unmuted. You may begin.
My name is Mark Stenjem, and that's STENEHJEM, and I oppose SB 10. I think that we should go ahead and reevaluate the administrative costs and those taxes that we have now been collecting. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 105. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Madam Chair and Committee, my name is Lynn Chapman. I'm the State Vice President of Nevada Families for Freedom. That's LYNNCHAPMAN. The phrase I've been hearing for quite some time now is affordable housing. If we are truly concerned about affordable housing, then we should be very wary of any increase in property taxes. You know, a 3% a year adds up in just a few years. Who needs affordable housing? Well, disabled people, retired people, single parents, young families just starting out, and lower income people. Higher property taxes hurt all of them, whether they are renting or they own a home. Imposing higher property taxes may deter investors that want to purchase a home or apartment complex to rent out, may reduce the incentive to purchase a home, especially for a new home buyer. Banks may be less available to loan to private customers. People have to pay property taxes on top of their mortgage payments, and when the taxes continually go up over every year, it creates a huge burden for families, especially those who rely on affordable housing. Families could lose their homes as property taxes continue to climb, and this would include owners of homes as well as renters, because we all know that owners of rental property pass on the increases of property taxes to their renters. Retired people work hard all their lives, and their largest investment is their home. So many people are taxed out of their homes during the last part of their lives due to consistent increases in property taxes. I know that for a fact because I've been talking to a lot of them. Does this sound like something that we should be participating in? And just a side note, taxpayers are not asked to pay the taxes. We are told what to pay, and if we don't pay, the government comes and they take our homes and our land. With all the economic problems we've had in the last year, people losing their jobs and their homes and their businesses, this is not the time to raise any taxes on the people. Please oppose SB 10. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 304. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Jim DeGraffenreid, JIMDEGRAFFENREID. I am the Republican National Committee man from Nevada. Nevada Republicans are in solid opposition to SB 10. Our state party platform states that the residents of the state of Nevada are not undertaxed and state government is not overfunded. Our budget crisis is the result of years of overspending and mismanagement. The current COVID-19 shutdown by emergency order has only exacerbated the budget crisis. Despite attempts to obscure that this is a tax increase with all the talk of stability, raising an abatement floor from 0 to 3% is an actual tax increase, no matter how you slice it. In 2020, Nevada's government elected to take extreme steps to address the pandemic, resulting in severe economic damage to Nevadans. Today, more than a year after COVID first appeared in Nevada, many businesses and individuals have not yet recovered. In December, the Economic Forum projected revenues will be reduced by $400 million over the coming biennium. Governor Sisolak's proposed budget contained no new taxes and a reduction in spending of $187 million. These shortfalls sound very serious, particularly in light of the fact that Nevada had to drain its rainy day fund to cover these expected reductions. But now we know the Nevada governments are receiving a $4.1 billion payoff from the federal government in the $1.9 trillion Relief Act just passed by Congress. State government alone will receive a $2.95 billion out of that money. County governments will get an additional $597 million directly. That is enough money to replenish the rainy day fund twice over and to fund budget shortfalls and replace any school budget reductions for many years. Government caused our current economic pain, and even though Nevada is being indemnified many times over using our federal tax dollars for our government's mistakes, the government is now coming to the very people they harmed with their economic policies to ask for more money that it doesn't need to fix their problem. That is unconscionable, and I urge a no vote on SB 10. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 643. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 643. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Felicia Kelly White, that's Kelley, White. Hi, I'm a renter here in the state of Nevada, and I oppose this horrible bill because I believe no one is really thinking about the impact that it's going to have on renters here in the state of Nevada. So I oppose the bill. And thank you for your time.
DPS, is anyone else on the line for opposition?
Yes, Chair. There are 4 more callers on the line currently.
Okay, thank you for that. So that 4 will take those and then wrap up.
Caller with the last three digits, 170. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hello, my name is Gina St. Ores, GINAST space ORES, and I strongly oppose SB 10 on the basis of the fact that over this past year with COVID, the cost of living in Nevada has gone up tremendously. And I've actually seen food in my budget double in cost. And now you guys are proposing a tax increase during an economic crisis, which makes no sense to me. But on top of that, in the last few weeks, gasoline has gone up 45 cents a gallon. I don't know how I'm supposed to afford to live here. And I should remind you guys, as well as everything that's been going on, there are companies like Tesla and let's see here. We've got Oracle and Hewlett-Packard, companies that made Silicon Valley. They're leaving the state of California because of taxes and the cost of living becoming too high. And that really concerns me, that you talk about this being something as a stability when in fact it's actually going to be a huge burden. And just 6 weeks ago, there was a survey done by UC Berkeley Institute of Government Studies that cited half of California voters are seriously considering moving out of California, and the number one reason was their taxes were too high. Why does Nevada want to make a California 2.0 is beyond me. Between this legislation, the legislation to increase registration, possible tax on non-taxable groceries, at a time of global crisis with the economics going just crazy. I mean, it's hit my home in almost the shape of almost $400 a month in expenses. And I'm staying home. It's because everything is far more expensive than it was just a year ago or even 6 months ago, especially now with the Keystone Pipeline shut down and gas going up. We don't know how much more is going to be passed down to us as the consumer. Retailers, all these places that you think that is going to be paying the most on these taxes are going to pass it down to us. And I urge you to vote against this, especially in our time of need. And thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 019. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and the committee. My name is Michael Molini. That's Moeini. I'm a homeowner, a veteran, and a proud resident of Nevada for the past 28 years. With the pandemic, I've recently taken on a third job in order to make ends meet, in order to keep a roof above my family's heads, in order to put my little girl through school. And I'm wondering, at what point will I need to take on a fourth? I know that I'm not the only person in this state that's had to take on extra work, that's had to buckle down and try to find a way to make ends meet, cutting costs, cutting expenses, cutting fun out of our lives. I don't understand how this is an issue, knowing that Nevada has been one of the most hardest hit states with this pandemic, how anyone would want us to take on this additional burden. It's easy to sit here and say, well, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Well, if it's not going to make a difference, why would we even have these talks? Why would there be a vote? How many people need to be hurt by this before we realize that it's regulations and policies such as this that's what's pushing people towards needing affordable housing? That's what's pushing people towards needing all this help from the government. The government is creating the restrictions that's keeping people from being able to live a fulfilled life where they can afford to take care of themselves and their families. Thank you very much for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 283. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller 283. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Marcos Lopez, Marcos Lopez, Americans for Prosperity, Nevada. I just kind of want to reiterate a lot of what everybody said, so I don't want to beat that horse too many times. But I do want to talk about spending, however. In 2019, there weren't so many calls about revenue when we passed collective bargaining agreements that are expected to increase our spending by over $1 billion by the end of this year whenever those labor negotiations are done. I don't hear much about that during prevailing wages, where we overpay 40% for construction, and we're legitimately wasting taxpayers' money for something we could do more efficiently and more effectively. So that's kind of where I feel on this, and I oppose SB 10. Thank you.
GPS, was that the last caller?
There's one more caller, Chair.
Okay.
Caller with the last three digits, 555. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask that you oppose SB 10. I'm calling on behalf of, in the state, homeowners, landlords, and renters. Homeowners, they usually buy a home because they know that's going to be a fixed cost. But when you have something like this where a downturn happens, that can, where the rates won't go down, that's an issue. So when they do come to a hard time, they're going to have to be paying more for, their taxes. Landlords, if they're asking the top market price, they don't have anywhere to go. They'll have to sell the property and just take their loss and go somewhere else and do something else. Or they're going to ask the renter to pay more. But they have that property to be a performing asset, and unfortunately that'll fall on the renters then. The renters will then pay more. Like, I have a property and it has a renter in there and it's below market value. So if I get hit with a tax, I have no choice but to pass that on to the person living there. And I don't want to do that, but I have to say, look, this was voted on by the legislature, and these are the members that did it, including one in this district. And if that's the case, and just say, look, it's not me. I don't want to raise this, but here we are, and this is the reality of the situation. When we talk about those graphs where they go down and up and down and up, they're preparing to pay for everything. They want to pay 100% of everything, all the wish lists and everything. What they need to do is be like us, the responsible homeowners and citizens of the state, and prepare for the worst case scenario. If you have extra, that's great. Maybe have a rainy day fund, but then rebate everybody at the end of the year for the property taxes that haven't been used. That should be the goal. Is how can we save everybody money, not how can we extract every little drop of blood from everybody so that we can get the maximum amount. I also, these people that are speaking for the municipalities, how many consultants were on the line? How many people were paid tax dollars to speak for the municipality? How come they couldn't speak for themselves? They had to hire somebody else on the other side. That I find is a little ironic. We need to be mindful that these are real people and real lives. And I don't want to have to go to my renter and say, I'm going to have to raise the tax. We voted on this years ago on the ballot, and then it was put into law after signature gathering and everything that we were going to have caps on taxes. Somehow that got subverted, and we have this 3% and 8% that we're talking about now. We need to go backwards. We need to go backwards and make it be what we had before, not progress into something that is just never-ending grabbing of other people's money. That's why everybody's always asking for a $15 minimum wage. Well, that's why people want that, because costs keep going up, and the businesses will never pay it. That's why they're in business. And the schools want funding, I understand that, but how come a private school like here in the Las Vegas area, they charge $5,000 a year, but the public schools charge $15,000? How can they provide a better education, but the public school charges more and it's inferior? So why don't we look toward the end goal of how can we get all the stuff done that we want to get done for less, rather than saying, well, we're not going to look at the details because they're kind of messy, and let's just look at how we can get more money, because in the end that doesn't serve anybody. Another thing is the private sector laid off, the public sector kept their employees on. I know employees at the DMV that were kept on, even though they weren't working the window, they were kept on. A lot of employees at, the state government offices where the doors were closed, we could not go into those offices, yet they were working, or they were working from home, or they were just laid off, and they, like I said, the DMV was getting paid. So, there's a lot of issues here. Nobody ever wants to discuss these things, but we need to discuss these things first before we start asking for everybody to pony up and pay for more. And that includes what I previously said. I want to make sure SB 284 for tax credits. I came in on the neutral line, but that was obviously a opposition. So please keep this in mind, guys. I think we can all work together and get something done. But the way we keep wanting to grab from somebody else, that's stealing, and that's wrong. Thank you. I appreciate you listening.
Okay, thank you for that. So, BPS, that was the last caller, correct?
2 more callers raised their hand to speak in opposition.
So if you guys have, because I really, we have to get to, I would like for you to condense your comments to, keeping it under a minute so that we can move forward. Senator Ratty, I'm going to let her, she has to jump off, our vice chair, to go to her next committee.
Chair, I have another committee as well. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Ratty?
That's okay. I'd rather wait until testimony's done.
Okay. So the 2 folks who raised their hand in opposition, if your comments have already been stated, please, ditto is perfectly fine. If you just want to simply say, I'm in opposition to SB 10, that is great, because we are running out of time.
Thank you,
Callers?
Chair.
Okay.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 541. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Ronald Najarro, State Director for Americans for Prosperity. I sit here and testify in opposition to this bill currently being proposed, SB 10, for all the reasons that we've heard from my colleagues and a lot of the members in the community. We just simply are facing an unprecedented health and economic crisis. As you know, COVID-19 has touched every aspect of our lives, changing the way we work, live, and the way we think about the future. Nevada will recover, but SB 10, instead of helping to spur economic growth, would just be more damaging to our economy and would be more burdensome to those that are currently in the best position to enable recovery, and that's us, Nevadans. We have sacrificed enough over the last year, and as we pick up pieces from the economic harm done in response to contain COVID-19, now is simply not the time to burden us with additional taxes, especially when our government continues to waste tax dollars inefficiently by overpaying upwards of 40% more for public works, which was what Marcos referred to earlier on prevailing wages. It's unconscionable to send the message that a possible 8% tax increase year over year is acceptable, especially given that 8% unemployment rate is double where we stood at this time last year. Moreover, and in the last point, we need to stop proposing tax hikes and engage in meaningful tax reform that overhauls the entire system while at the same time cutting wasteful spending. This means a tax reform package that makes Nevada's code simpler by eliminating complexities to promote compliance and increase revenues, more efficient by removing market distorting impediments, more equitable by eliminating tax loopholes and tax credits that favor one group over others, such as the film tax credit, and predictable to inspire economic growth, investment, and improve our competitiveness with other states. There's already broad consensus in academic studies that promote solid, sustainable economic growth. We ask that you consider voting no for SB 10, the increase in property tax hikes. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for letting me testify.
Thank you. Final and last caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 706. Please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hello, Eddie Diaz, EDDIEDIAZ, Community Engagement Director with the Libra Initiative Nevada. Chair Neal and members of the committee, many people, especially in the Hispanic community, have taken a big hit because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hispanics, just like many others in our state, had to learn to cut back and be smart about their budget and spending. Government should do the same. Adding more burdensome taxes to our community is not the solution to move forward and recover. Please oppose SB 10. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity. So that was the final caller, correct?
Yes, Chair Neal.
Okay, thank you. Senator Ratty.
I believe you need to do neutral still.
I do. Okay. So BPS, is anyone logged in for neutral testimony on SB 10?
If you would like to offer neutral testimony to SB 10, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 490. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Begin.
Hello, my name is Cyrus Hojadi, and there's some good things that I like about this bill because, look, if taxes go up, this will backfire, and it may even cause a lot of great things to happen. It will pressure further property prices even lower. It will accelerate the upcoming real estate collapse that we're about to have, because we're in a real estate bubble, and this will be a double whammy in our economy. And the fact is, you guys are going to think you're going to continue to get help from the federal government and the Federal Reserve. Well, bond yields and the rising debt tell us a different story. You know what? Let the thing backfire. Maybe we can rebuild, because you guys probably should look into Detroit, New Jersey, that have done tax modifications like that. And maybe this will be an opportunity for us to kind of recover and restructure Nevada. And the fact is that a lot of this tax money is going to over-bloated government employees. You look at these six-figure salaries, these are red flags. And I am tired of hearing about this fact that Nevada is becoming more progressive. We don't have progressive taxation. State and local taxes, wealthier people pay a lower rate. And the fact is that one of the reasons for this is because we have a government that's overwhelmingly controlled and pumped by casinos, real estate, and other different types of interests. Not to mention the culinary union is part of this political machine. And by the way, they haven't spoken opposition so far as I know. Keep that in mind. And the fact is that the disgusting part about this is that there's instead no tax hikes done on gambling taxes. Why not? Go after them. They're having higher bonuses. Why don't you guys at least do us a favor and lower our sales taxes? So, don't make us like a one-sided deal for us. And the fact is, this also proves that our government isn't much different than it was in 2015, despite we have different party composition. We had a Republican control, and they gave us a commerce tax. This is why I'm telling a lot of people, party power doesn't really mean anything. What matters is who they represent. And the fact is, our tax structure is regressive. It's aimed at the lower income ladder, and it's covering the rich crony establishment. And the campaign contributions explains everything. So I urge you all to perhaps maybe let it happen. It will backfire. We will rise up. Although the problem is people didn't have the balls to fight against the stadium. But maybe we can get another second chance. And hopefully this will burst the real estate bubble. And this is going to be a very interesting ride. Thank you so much.
Okay. BPS, is anyone else in neutral? I'm going to go ahead.
Chair, there are no other callers at this time.
Okay, great. Once again, a spirited discussion around property taxes. Senator Ratty.
Thank you. I just did want to ask the sponsor a couple questions just to make sure that, because obviously there was a lot of testimony on both sides in support and opposition that said things about the bill, and I think that there are some things that were said that aren't actually in the bill. So I want to make sure that we have the record accurate. So first thing, Ms. Stapleton, is there anything in this bill that removes the 3% cap for a homeowner-occupied property? Anything that removes that protection of 3%?
Thank you so much, Senator Ratty, through Chair Neal, through you. No, this bill does not remove the caps. Property taxes are still capped and would be if this bill were passed at 3% for residential, 8% for commercial. In addition, this bill does not remove the secondary formula that allows the commercial cap to drop below 8%. All this bill does is ensure that those caps cannot go below 3%. This bill also does not raise the tax rate at all or make any other changes to Nevada's property tax system. It simply ensures that those caps cannot go to 0% because of an obscure formula, which they do in rare years, rare occurrences.
Is there anything in this bill that forces property taxes to go up 3%? So there was some testimony that the property taxes could go up 3% even if it wasn't forced. So if there's no abatements in play and your property does not appreciate 3%, will your property go up? Is it forced to go up 3%?
No, it is not. The caps only apply when your property tax bill would increase. The caps only apply in that instance. There are years when your property taxes could decrease based on the formula. The caps only apply if your bill increased, and SB 10 would then only apply to those caps in those years so that the cap could not go to 0.
And lots of testimony about the bloated state budget. Does the majority of property taxes go to the state? Do any property taxes go to the state?
The majority of property taxes go to local governments, counties, cities, special districts, school districts.
So we're talking about nothing that we're doing here that's really going to benefit the state budget, a tiny little sliver on capital projects, but most of this is schools and local governments. And finally, is there anything in this bill that changes how we assess the valuation of somebody's house, so how we determine the value?
Dagny Stapleton again for the record. I apologize if I didn't say that. No, there is nothing in this bill, Senator Ratty, that would change the way that we assess property or value property. It would not change the depreciation. It would not change how property is assessed. It would not change that formula. It would only make a very small change, very minimal change to the cap, how the caps on how much your bills can increase are calculated.
Thank you. Senator Neal, Chair Neal, I appreciate the discretion. Again, hate this bill, love this bill. I want to make sure that the record is accurate. Thank you. I do have to jump over to Chair Health and Human Services, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you for that. So any closing comments, Ms. Stapleton?
No, thank you. I appreciate, Dagny Stapleton for the record, I appreciate Chair Neal, you and the members of the committee for allowing us to present this bill. I would just have wanted to reiterate what Senator Ratty asked me for clarification in terms of what this bill does and does not do. And again, we appreciate the time today and the opportunity.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will close the hearing on SB 10 and open up for public comment.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to make public comment on today's meeting, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, if you would like to make public comment on today's meeting, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. It appears there are no callers wishing to give public testimony at this. Oh, excuse me. Caller with the last 3 digits, 751. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin. Caller, you are unmuted. It appears the caller is unresponsive, Chair.
Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and close public comment. And we will adjourn Senate revenue. Everybody have a good afternoon.